Hey. It is Sarah Jane from Access Your True Nature and Vital Animal Talk. And I wasn't going to make a video today, but I've had a couple of prompts that made me realize that I need to speak more to how to find lost animals, because this is something that's not always easy. Hi, Gail. And I've found that there's been a lot of complaints lately around so-called professional animal communicators. And if any of you have taken my Being Human Through Animal Communication program, hi Barbara, you'll already know that I've spoken about this before. And I think it's important for us to have a refresh because it can't do any harm. So if you're not currently on any of my paid programs, or you have previously studied with me or had sessions with me, I really invite you to follow your heart when it comes to choosing a practitioner, because I want to just share what my insight is on this, because I've received some disturbing emails, and in fact one came from my mentor of animal communications, Penelope Smith, who really was the best thing ever as far as opening myself up to the gifts that I had. And that there's been a lot of complaints about so-called professional animal communicators, and I've seen this myself in my own practice, where I've been sort of called as the last port of call for people that have contacted many other professional animal communicators, and that have really been taken for a ride. And it used to break my heart. In fact, at one stage I was like, I'm not doing this because I didn't want to be associated with the sort of fraudulence and preying on people's emotions and not having any ethics when it came to being really gentle and kind with people that are clearly in pain. Hi, Mark. This is not easy, and sadly, I'm all too aware of many students that I've certainly worked with that have previously trained with other people, that there's a tremendously vast difference in what people are providing in their professional capacity as an animal communicator, and their programs are not just in key animal communication teaching, but also in their integrity and in their ethics and their boundaries, and what is professional and what is not professional practice. And sadly, hi Colleen, this is the basis of many professional animal communication trainings that I've seen, and some I've actually paid to do myself. It's just like, I think why I receive countless inquiries about very upset, cynical, and distressed, rightly so, people that have worked with other communicators, and they've failed. They've let these people down in not being supportive and compassionate in how they're translating what they're creating in this business of animal communications and gestalt tracking. And I think we really have to realize our human egoic part in this, and not blame and shame. This really distresses me a lot. And if you followed my work for a while, whether that's been on the human side of it or with your animal companions, you'll know that I take my work pretty seriously. I'd like to say I'm a very heart-centered practitioner with a lot of certifications, a lot of science behind me on neuroplasty, on animal behaviors and zoopharmacology, and also a very strong intuitive drive to act as a catalyst to create change, to empower people to be their own medicine and be their own transformation, so that they can be the best version of themselves and for their animals. And it's this drive of mine. When my own cat, Satchmo, decided that his contract with me was done after years of ups and downs, he kept leaving home. I kept gestalt tracking him and bringing him home, and he'd leave again. And it took me a long time. In fact, I hired another very good friend of mine that also does this work, because I wouldn't receive the information that our soul contract was done. And it took me ages to let him go. And it makes me really sad, and in fact quite angry, when I hear about people that have been burnt by fraudulent people that are actually preying on human emotions, when people are very vulnerable, and then they go off and they generalize that all animal communicators are woo and crazy and it's useless. And this is really what I've delved into a lot in my own Being Human Through Animal Communication program, because I have a very thorough training program in place, but now I've created all the collated all this information of situations that never needed to happen from people that have had bad experiences. And if the training had just been put in place in the first place, it would never have had to happen. So back to finding lost animals. The challenge that I see often is that people often consult with an animal communicator or somebody like me to help them find lost animals, and it is one of the most difficult things. In fact, it's probably the most taxing and emotionally charged part of the work that I do, when I'm being asked to do something. And there's a lot of frustration for clients that really just want their animals back. They don't care how, and both the lost animal and their people are under an incredible amount of stress, and animals often can't communicate well where they are due to confusion, or they're in an unfamiliar place, and a lot of times they're afraid, they're in danger, and in their desperation they can't talk. And a lot of times people consult with many animal communicators at once, which also, is very confusing, because they'll get different answers from different people. Hi, Candace. Once I had a woman, just to illustrate a lot of this bewilderment, that her cat had disappeared from home like 10 months ago, and she'd hung posters around. She relentlessly went to shelters. She offered a reward. They offered the guards and the garbage collectors a reward for any information if they'd found any dead animals. And she was calling those cats every day. She was keeping in touch. She was going to the shelters. She was speaking to her vets in the areas, and she said that she had received a lot of calls that were very false trails of cats that turned out to be very similar. But one of the women that was feeding ferals had told her that she'd seen her cat many times, but when she went to the location, she never saw her cat, and that woman never saw that cat again either. And that was sort of the point where she decided to call an animal communicator, and the first communicator that she got hold of told her that her cat stayed on the street in similar places that she'd already searched, and she was beside herself, and later she tried with an animal communicator who did dowsing, and he told her, it was a very sort of vague, wide description of a very big area to search, and he was like the first person who told her that the cat was in a house. So this lady was putting up posters in that area, and still there was just crickets. There was just nothing. And she tried a lot of animal communicators. One told her her cat was dead. Another one had said she was in a house with someone, and they were all giving different areas and different information. And another one said her cat was on the street. So she was very overwhelmed. She really didn't know what to think by the time she came to me, and she was pretty skeptical. But her desire to get her cat back or get some closure, it just kind of happened that she got referred to me by word of mouth by someone that I had helped, and we had a successful coming home with this person's dog, and she'd referred her out. So, the question that I get asked a lot is, how is it possible that all these communicators that this woman had paid had given her different versions in different places and different information, and how do you know what's the truth and what's a load of BS? And wow, I just want you to make you aware that there's many facets to the art of finding lost animals. And some of the insights that I've got in my gestalt tracking and in communicating with the animals themselves that are lost is that I really just want to empower the people that are missing their animals and love their animals to just take charge of their situation and ask questions, because oftentimes we just need to feel like we're doing everything possible to bring them home, and it's emotionally draining. And gestalt tracking is part of my practice that I've done for decades, and I've done hundreds of consultations. And I've had a good success rate, but I still can't say no, because, you know, it's never about the money. If I was charging for the amount of hours that I put into this, no one would be able to afford it. And there's a part of me that can't say no, because I know what it feels like to not know. And out of dedication and service to the people and the animals that are in distress, I'll never stop doing this work. Even though a lot of times I do enjoy guiding animals home and helping people to actually learn how to help their own animals to come home, remotely spotting locations where an animal's hiding or is trapped or held, so that people can go there is the joy of it. But it's also very frustrating, you know, to have to tell somebody that their animal is not coming back because they've decided to move on, or that their animal is dead. And I often find that just contacting animals with a very clear and compassionate focus helps the animals to come home within minutes and sometimes hours of that first connection. And I have a great success rate in finding animals that are alive. And even in one case, I'll never forget, Cavi, this King Cavalier Spaniel, he was gone for over a year, and his people never gave up. They found him pretty much in the exact street that I had seen him in, and given him the information about who the people were that were with him, down to the details of the child that had taken this dog as her companion. And, you know, they never gave up, and eventually he did come home, but it took a year for that to happen. And, you know, once I had a person on a summit that called in and said, you know, my cat's lost, and no pressure on me to instantly figure out where the cat was. But after asking the cat's name and physical description of the cat and the address, because there's a lot of cats called Blackie, or a lot of dogs called Butch. So, you know, after I got the information from this woman on this call, I could feel him viscerally, and I could see him hiding under a shed in the backyard that this woman would be able to have seen from her kitchen window. And when I asked this cat to come out, and this woman that went to her kitchen window while I was on that call, she like shrieked, because she literally said she could see her cat wiggling himself out from underneath the shed. And it was like, sure, you know, thank goodness on a live tele summit that ended well. But it's not always that way, and it takes a lot of patience. And I think a lot of what gets in the way, and I found that the chances of finding missing animals increases if they're lost for hours or days rather than weeks or months or years. And that the longer the time that they're away definitely adds a lot more confusing information into the mix, especially if the animal's been moving around, because, you know, he's trying to get back home. And also people's ideas about where the animal might be and their own emotional distress can be a big hindrance on getting clear connections with the animal in real time. You know, the ideas, the pictures, the feelings of others that are sort of speculating or tuned in and communicating about the lost animal also muddies the whole energetic field about where the animal's location is. So I always ask people, when they do ask me to gestalt track their missing pets, that they stop, you know, hiring a million other people at the same time and just focus on the information that I'm giving them, and at least, you know, do the due diligence over 2 weeks. And, you know, to handle a lot of this upset and distress, I really ask people to really calm down at the beginning of my consultation, because of course they're emotionally charged and they have every right to be upset. So I always ask my clients to give me only the name, description of the animal, and the physical address, and the information about the initial disappearance, because not anybody's idea about where the animal can be are going to influence what's going on. And then I do my absolute best to energetically tune in. It's very visceral sometimes in my body, where I'll smell things or I'll hear something, and if they're hurt, obviously I do energy work on them to support them, give them some fast aid. But it is a little bit like hunting for a needle in a haystack. And of course I constantly have to get my own projections and expectations about the outcome out of the way, so that I can really tune in and listen to what the animal is saying. So, you know, if people's animals don't return home right away. I mean, I've had some really angry, distraught people that have made me feel wrong and shamed me or tell me how disappointed they were, even though they got their cats back or their dogs back. And I totally get it, that underneath all of that, they're just hurt and they're just afraid and they're just desperate for more information. And it doesn't matter how many times I say, don't worry if you don't hear from me. It's not that I'm not actively looking. It's just that I don't have any specific information or leads to give you to go out and start looking for your animals. So I've had to really start learning to set limits on how much time I will take to find a specific lost animal and make it work in order for it to be effective in a short period of time. Otherwise, it just constantly takes over the rest of my life. You know, I kind of become quite obsessive compulsive about it and irritable with the rest of my family, and because I want what I want, and that's to get the animal home. And we all know that when we start pushing energy and it starts to get really needy, animals don't like that heaviness and they want to get as far away as possible. So I have to make sure I keep myself in check and grounded and have a clear focus and vision without the emotional attachment. And you know, here's the thing too, I can't do the groundwork for my clients. It's about a commitment. It's about a two-way conversation that we're working on this together, and together we decipher what it could possibly mean, because the person knows their animal better than I do, and it's up to them to actually go out and physically go do the groundwork, because I'm often in a totally different country. So I have to get a lot more clear when I do a consultation by phone, and very clear that the client is willing to go and do the physical work, because it's emotionally difficult. And they're the ones that have to leave no stone unturned and go out and look. And of course, I wouldn't be human if I didn't doubt myself, if I didn't have reservations, because sometimes I do get incorrect information, or I translate it differently, right? It gets lost in translation. And oftentimes I've had a cat that looks exactly like the animal I'm looking for, but it's not their cat. And most people appreciate the information that I give them, but it's after following these sort of incidents of people being pissed off that I got a little bit cautious, even though my usual reservations are there and I get this gut knowing that the animal is dead. I'm nervous. You know, I once had a guy that said, oh, you know, his cat came home, and I said, no, your animal's passed. And he was rightly pissed with me because I'd caused so much upset and hurt and in grieving the loss of their beloved cat. This cat came home, and he couldn't actually appreciate that, because he said, you know, if I'd hurt him this way, how much harm was I causing to other people in the same situation? So he couldn't appreciate that his cat actually came back, and he wasn't willing to forgive me for my mistake that I made interpreting that whether his cat was dead or alive status. So it's not easy work, and I don't always interpret the information correctly. You know, I'm human, but I'm doing the best that I possibly can. And you know, I oftentimes when I have on occasion received anger or hurt, and it hasn't happened a lot, even when the person's got a good outcome after hiring me to gestalt track their missing cat or dog or horse. I've had some horses that have been stolen that we've successfully got back after, you know, many a wild goose chase. But it made me reevaluate my animal communication practice to whether I was indeed creating more harm than good, and if I actually wanted to do the work, because you know, it's not in and out in an hour. It never ends until we get closure. And you know, I probably would have quit a long time ago if I'd taken it personally. And I've sworn many times that I'll never do it again because it causes me a lot of distress, but I can't say no. So some people that are not familiar with my work, or energy medicine or animal communication, or working with entities in spirit realms, they're not always ready to hear the harsh truth that their animals are ready to leave and fulfill another part of their soul contract or life purpose, or that they're happy with another family, which was the case with my beloved Satchmo, who'd been through so much with me. And when my daughter came, he was done. And it's not easy. to let that go. And it's not easy to accept that your animal is passed because maybe you didn't have time to say goodbye, you haven't got physical proof of the body. And it doesn't matter how compassionately or gently I can tell people that, and I'm really talking about the 1% here, that didn't maybe understand or honor the scope of this work. But it doesn't serve these people to relate these hard to accept perceptions that often can't be validated in the physical world. And I remember once I was asked to track a farm dog of one of my clients in the Cape, and when I did tune into this gorgeous little dog, he did indeed tell me that he'd been bitten by a snake. He wasn't in his body anymore. That was part of his contract, and he told me exactly where we could find his body. And when my client went there, he was there, and she was so relieved to find his body. But she couldn't see proof that she'd been bitten by a snake, because at that point his body had been eaten by jackals and hyenas, and his body was pretty decomposed by the time she got there. But there was just such deep relief that there was closure, and she got to take his body parts home and lay him to rest in her garden, where she planted a rose bush in memory of his beautiful companionship and what a great dog he'd been. And there was closure for her. So I think we need to remain compassionate, and when we're making contact telepathically, or when we're having spiritual attunement with a human or an animal client, as a professional animal communicator, I really do the best to listen deeply to all of it and honor the state of being, along with the truth of this person and the relationship that they have with their beloved animal companion. Because I think it's part of reverence. It's part of honoring the cycle of life and death and the deep relationships that we form with animals, to take time to find the words and the feelings and give the support in the grieving that's going to comfort people, and also give them a sense of connection, a sense of hope that it matters, and no matter what happens, my dedication is always to the greatest service of all human beings, especially the kind humans, and to their animal companions. And that in my being human, I have to not listen to my head tripping or my inner saboteur voices, and really center myself from a place of not censoring or limiting the information that comes out. Because in the early days, I used to hold back a lot on that because it sounded totally insane or crazy, or it didn't make any sense. But fortunately, most of my clients, and I can say this wholeheartedly, that what I perceive, as crazy as it might be, we work together with that information for the best outcome possible for that animal to come back to his people. And I very much follow Penelope Smith's code of ethics for animal communications, interspecies communication, which really states that the goal of any consultation or workshop or lecture or animal communication or interspecies experience is so much more. It's balance, it's compassion, it's understanding, it's allowance, it's communion, it's reverence, it's grace, it's faith, and above all, it's trust of that communication between all beings. So when I consult or teach, I find that that we must always stay in our humanness and know that, of course, we're not always going to get it right. We're going to make mistakes. We're not always a perfect match either, or in alignment with everybody that's going to ask of your assistance. But if you are doing this work of gestalt tracking lost animals, include extensive follow-up time with your clients. It's our duty as communicators, as people in service to animals and their people, to do the best that we can and show up fully with the desire to find this beloved animal that is part of somebody's family, and also to know our boundaries, because it is emotional work. It's deeply, deeply gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching, beautiful, brutal work. So, look at this. If you're about to hire an animal communicator, in assisting you in finding a lost animal, or with behavioral issues or health issues, you know, I really encourage you to let the skeptic have its voice, and ask questions and see if they're a fit for you. You know, there's so much about utilizing techniques, and for me it's really about building trust through the trust process before I even begin to ask animals, are you okay, or are you in your body, and asking them for specific details. One has to have a connection of trust, and I'm very sensitive and noticing those subtle shifts between energetic states, and also spirit's connection with the physical body. And I use muscle testing. I have a huge power tool box, so I'll dowse if I need to, or I will use remote viewing. And I also ask my ancestral helping spirits and my animal guides and my spirit guides and that animal's guides to support me in helping me to find that animal and bring them back. You know, this is bigger than just one person, and shamanic journeying is a big part of my work, because we have to honor life in the living and the process of soul contracts, and also the feeding cycle of death in how we guide animals home and if they want to come home. So I hope that this has given you a little bit more clarity into the subtle nuances of animal communications, and also the experience of the practice that really does demand the art of finding lost animals that many animal communicators don't offer as part of their services, because it's emotionally charged. It is work that never stops, and it's very difficult. You know, it's not an open and shut thing. It takes dedication and patience, and as long as there's an animal or a person out there that is asking for my help and assistance, I'm going to always show up and do the best that I can. So just remember, learn to calm your mind, learn to be open to a wider perspective so you can get much clearer reception in how you're connecting and communicating with your animal friends to come home if they want to come home to you, and if they're able, and also to use the golden cord activation, which you can find on my SoundCloud account, where I really encourage people who are missing their animals to tell them that you're waiting as long as it takes for them to come home, and you are here to guide them home if that is what they're choosing. So if you would like to know more about this work, or how I work with animal communications and energy work for kind people and their animal companions or animals in the wild, drop me an email, or let me know what you'd like to know about finding peace in the chaos and the calm, and also how to keep your animals safe and bring your loved ones home if they are missing. And just know you're not alone, and support is sometimes the one thing that we overlook because we think nobody would understand how we're feeling, and a lot of people out there say, well, it's just an animal. And if you've ever loved an animal, or you've never had children and your animals are your life, you'll know what I'm talking about here. So don't let anyone discourage you. Stay focused on what you want, and ask questions, get support, and know that you are enough for your animals. You're enough for your animals. You're enough for your body. And just trust the universe has your back. All right. Lots of love. Bye. If you like this, share it, comment, and know that I'm here if you're feeling nudged to go deeper into this beautiful world of interspecies communication. All right. Bye.